Good evening, and thank you for coming tonight to the Citizens for Property Rights Wood Burning Freedom Summit. We are pleased to bring you some amazing guests. First, I'd like to thank our host and the pastor, Aaron Richard. He has also graciously provided refreshments in the other building. Tonight, you're going to hear unique perspectives from individuals that have been involved in protecting your rights and freedoms for many years. And I want to let you know what I believe is the key for such a time as this. Number one, you need to stop signing your rights away. Every time you sign an agreement with them, you're placing your liberty and others in jeopardy. Know the value of your signature. If you do decide to do the borough swap out program, then write in next to your signature, I don't give permission for anyone to come on my property. You can help set the terms of your contract. Number two, keep burning, but resist peacefully, even if it costs you a criminal record. You're not criminals. Standing for what's right for everyone will cost us. It cost the founding fathers their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Benjamin Franklin. Get out and vote. Do your civic duty. Vote in every single conservative that is willing to fight for your freedoms. Tammy Wilson comes to mind. Vote for the initiative in October. Give rides to the polls for anyone and everyone. Let your voice be heard. Attend meetings, write letters to the editor, call the TV stations, call everyone, the assembly members, city council members, state agencies, federal agencies, neighbors, friends, strangers. Tell everyone what's happening. Pray. God is not dead. He does allow us to go through difficulties, but only for our betterment. And I, for one, can say with Job, though the Lord slay me, yet will I trust him. Let us humble ourselves under the hand of a mighty God and see his miracles. Government is for the people, by the people, else it's tyranny. Remember that. And with that, may I introduce our guest speakers. First is former City Councilwoman Vivian Stiver. Next would be Borough Assembly candidate Sam Tuck, City Councilman David Pruse, Borough Assemblyman Lance Roberts, and last is Senator Michael Dunleavy, candidate for governor. Please welcome them. And now, Vivian.
Hi, everyone. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight because this is a big issue in our community. There's a gentleman out front who was handing out an article regarding the science behind this clean air and everything. The EPA was let's say, under the Obama administration, the EPA had carte blanche. Seems as though our current administration is making some changes. So I can't help but feel very positive. So what went wrong? Well, what went wrong was EPA decided they were going to test the air quality. They were supposed to use a certain number of cities. They ended up using fewer cities. And they did not control in those cities for people who were already having respiratory issues. So you had this mix of people who already had respiratory issues being counted as if the air quality was causing their problem. So let's go back a little bit to the days when we were in school. I don't know if our kids get taught this anymore, but let's talk about the scientific method. Okay? You have something called a correlative study. You see something happening, and it seems to happen often in a sequence. So you think these two things are related. So what are you going to do? You're going to have a hypothesis that these two things are related. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to try to create the situation again and see what the outcome is. So if you create this experiment and the outcome stays the same every time you do it, you have cause and effect. That is your strongest science. That is not how the EPA operated. And it's a real issue. It's a real problem because now we're being held to rules that the science has never been released of what they've done. It's never been let out for independent review. This is a problem. So when I was on city council, I think this is when the whole thing blew up with the outdoor boilers. It's the year that they all hit the town, and there were just outdoor boilers everywhere. It was very interesting because the mayor at the time, she had one in her garage. So she decided, we got a problem. We're going to put a moratorium on them. Can't have any more wood boilers in the city. Well, that's great, but you had a real bad one in a part of the city. It was horrible. It was cranking out a lot of smoke. They knew they had problems, but government helped us, right? They put a moratorium on them, so they couldn't even change out a bad burner. Needless to say, we made sure that happened, regardless of what the government had to say, because it was ridiculous, a ridiculous rule. The neighbors noticed that the air was cleaner, but never realized that they're burning coal, not wood. So when you hear that coal is bad, that's untrue. We have clean coal in this state. And one of the reasons I was told it's clean coal is because it was developed under fresh water. Back in Tennessee, that coal was developed out of salt water. And apparently there's a component that's how you get your clean coal. So we're being fed a lot of garbage. And there's just not enough people these days talking about these issues with their neighbors. Because nobody wants to argue. It's not an argument. It's about sharing and communicating good information. So what are we going to do? Christine, can you help me? I have printed on here, right now EPA is taking testimony about Alaska's PM 2.5 state implementation plan, the state level, until midnight, February 22nd. You have to take action. You have to write, get online, send in your comments. Now, I'm going to try to get with Christine tomorrow, possibly Lance, David, and get some talking points up on the Facebook page. Maybe, the outline of how we had a change-out program, how we complied, how our community became educated to burn cleaner, burn better. So we'll get you some talking points, but you need to encourage everyone that you know. You need to do it yourself. And it's our right. This is our freedom to burn clean, okay? We've all got our EPA stoves. We've done a great job. We've educated ourselves. A lot of people said they didn't know about drying the wood particular ways. They were not resentful to learn something new. When I worked with Representative Tammy Wilson, I would come out here to work, and I would look at the sky, and I would see where there was, smoke coming up. And her and I would get in the car, and for days, we drove through this community. We even did some in Fairbanks, knocked on doors and said, hey, there's a change-out program. Do you know this? Do you know when the borough was asked, why don't you go talk to people? Why don't you go ask them? Why don't you go see what they need? What we found was retired seniors that had no money, that could barely stoke their coal in their burners to be warm. This is what we found. The borough said, they're afraid of you guys. They don't want to go out there and knock on your door. So there again, communication, your government working for you. So this is the crux of the whole issue. They're pushing us, my opinion is they're pushing us toward natural gas as hard and fast as they can. They're going to eliminate us with our wood. They're going to eliminate oil. Then we're going to pay higher price for natural gas, which you can't get. Good thing Senator Dunleavy's here. He was in Juneau when we had a splendid plan for a gas line that our current governor said, I got a better idea. Well, guess what? That gas line's even further away. It's going to cost us even more money. It's a world commodity. It is based on what's going on around the world. Everyone else that had their self together are now in construction. That means Alaska's gas doesn't have as many options as it did 3 years ago. So, I'm sorry, am I talking that long already? I also brought you a copy of what's going to be on the ballot. This is not the actual ballot language. They don't do that till about June. But this is what I have. So if we want to get these passed out so you can get familiar with it and help your neighbors. We're going to have to get out there person to person. Now, I talked with Representative Wilson the other night, and she's talking about the possibility of putting a petition together and going straight to Washington with this issue. And so what we're thinking would be a great word to get the word out on how to vote on this issue would be collecting signatures for a petition and saying, hey, remember, vote yes on 2. Be free to burn clean. Let's be free to burn clean. So, got to take action. So I hope when we leave tonight, everybody will take action, get online, and tell the EPA what's going on. Tell them what you did. Tell them that you changed out your boiler and you have an EPA approved. And now they're saying, oh, you can't use that one because there's a better one. Tell them how your borough assembly says, oh, stop. Those little precipitator things you stick in your chimney that gather more pollution. Oh, no. No, we're just going to table that because what? That's old science. I was looking at that science in Europe 7 years ago. So they're not doing their homework on the borough assembly. They should know about this science, and it makes it cleaner and better. So she's not going to hold up another card because she's handing things out, but I guess anybody have a question or two? Or Yeah. Well, I have I don't know about asking for money. I wasn't prepared to talk about budgets. But I can say what we can do is go. We can send our petition to Donald Trump. We can send it to EPA. We can CC our representatives in Washington. And you know who else is our allies? Western states. Except maybe California. But the Western states are all aligned on many issues. Yeah, not that place. But they're we've got similar issues with land and water rights and everything. So there is possibly a larger group that is having similar issues as we are. But we have to have our voice heard, have to get the word out. And our motto, Tammy and I talked about this, the motto should be free, the number 2, because we believe we're going to be ballot measure number 2 on the ballot, free to burn clean. We've done what they've asked, and they've gone too far. Well, and this is another interesting fact about the science. Okay, Hawaii doesn't count days that they have volcanic troubles because that puts ash in the air. We get to take the days that we have fireplaces or forest fires, and we don't count those days. But what do we have? We have something called an inversion, another natural occurrence that we cannot do anything about. Now, I think it'd be a great idea to put big fans on top of all these buildings to suck all the air up and out, but it's still just going to bounce back down, right? So we don't have an exemption for that. And there was a study, and I hate to talk because I don't have the paper because I'm not in the legislature anymore working for anybody. University of Alaska was commissioned by the borough for a study on this air quality. They didn't like the study they got. That scientist said, you can never achieve that here because of the inversion. So they went to an outside firm, didn't even know our climate, scared to death to come here in the cold. So they picked and choose what science they want, and it all started on bad science. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sam Tuck.
Good evening, everyone. Appreciate you coming out tonight. Nice to see you, Mr. Dunleavy. I'm going to give you my 2-minute, probably 30-second spiel on why you should vote for me. And then I'll try to get on topic. They had asked me to speak about the natural gas project here tonight. So my name is Sam Tuck. I am running for Borough Assembly, and I would appreciate your consideration. I will have some cards out front if you'd like to pick them up. I'd be glad if you do. You can check out my positions on my website. Natural gas. This has been an elusive project for years for Fairbanks. I came up here in 1977 originally, and they were talking about natural gas would be here any day right after the oil line. We're still standing here today and don't have natural gas. With the help of a lot of legislators, including Mr. Dunleavy, a borough was able to get some funding for a natural gas project, and they started the IGU, which is the Interior Gas Utility. The borough is now in the gas business. There's no question about that. The gas company is Fairbanks North Star Borough. I hope and pray that they can pull this off. It is a tremendous project. It has a lot of working parts, moving parts in it, and it has a lot of downfalls if they're not careful. It's about a $331 million project. About 50 some odd million dollars of that is grants. The rest of it is deferred payments, basically. The deferred payment part of it really troubles me. They're hoping for a 15-year deferment on the payments, and that's how they're saying they're going to justify having gas here. But at the end of that 15-year period, you've got to start paying that money back. That's going to be a tough pill. Tough. My fear, and this is my personal beliefs, I don't think they're going to make their conversion rates. I think the conversion rates are way too high. A lot of people that I respect have looked at it. They think it's too high. They tell everybody in public that they can walk away from the project 15 years from now if it doesn't work out. That's not possible. When we're on the hook for $330 million, no one's walking away. They purchased F&G. F&G has about 1,100 customers in the city, basically. F&G dragged their feet, I believe, on trying to develop their pipeline, but to take their side, there was no benefit to them trying to develop out the distribution system. I mean, they had a distribution system that was serving about 1,000 people. They expanded it out to about 1,100 over a 15-year period. They were making money. And, as a private company, that's the bottom line, is what your profit margin is. So the borough says they could do it better. They bought F&G out, paid a tremendous price for it, I think. I think it ended up costing about $60 million. You could talk about the F&G project for hours, and it's pretty boring, really. But the bottom line is it's affecting everyone here tonight, everyone. I hope and pray it works. That's all I can say. But my fear is, here are my fears. I think the borough has an intention to start driving cost of energy up to incentivize this conversion to natural gas. There's a lot of discussion right now about forcing customers in the borough to use low sulfur fuel. Low sulfur fuel is a boutique fuel here. It's going to cost you. Just doing some rough numbers, talking to some people, this is just off the cuff, you're probably looking at least $1 more per gallon on top of what you're paying now. That's what I think would be a minimum charge. That will incentivize you to use natural gas if they can bring natural gas in at a decent price. The target was always $15 a therm. It's now $17.50 a therm. I think in the city, the last I checked, they're paying about, and that's because FNG was purchased by IGU. They are paying about 21 cents a therm right now. And I can't see it coming down. I don't even understand that argument. They're talking about because of scale, they'll be able to, sell it cheaper. My suspicion is 21 cents a therm would be a grand if we could get it for that. I mean, it's going to cost, it's too high. People are not going to convert. If they force a conversion, I believe you're not going to be able to keep your oil boilers. I think, because it makes no sense. Why would they force a conversion? If you can keep your oil boiler, you just keep using oil. So if they force a conversion, and this is from some discussions I've had with some members there on the Borough Assembly, and I may be wrong. Maybe I don't see it the correct way, but you can judge for yourself. They don't think it's a problem. They don't call it forced conversion, but they don't see it as a problem if they tell you have to go to natural gas. If they have some program where you can pay for the boiler that's installed over time through the IGU. So in other words, they come in and you have to pay $15,000 for a boiler. It'll just be added on to your bill, to your fuel bill with the IGU, and you'll pay for it over time until you pay it off. To me, that's forced conversion. I mean, they're not giving you an option. You've got to go to gas. We're going to have this system where we finance it for you, and we'll just put it on your bill. Well, I don't want it. Sorry, you got to have it. That's forced conversion. So I'm hoping it works out differently than I see it, but I just see a lot of downfalls to it. The natural gas thing has been pushed for years, and I would love to see it. I think it really passed us by 10 years ago because the oil industry, as we've known it, the back of OPEC was broken. And when they broke the back of OPEC, it changed the oil industry. You can tell that today. Any conflict that came up 10 years ago, 5 years ago, if a conflict came up in the world, oil prices shot up overnight. Boom. It was an excuse, whatever it was, especially in the Middle East. Now, I mean, look at it today. There are all kind of conflicts going along. Oil prices stay fairly steady. They've started creeping back up, thankfully. I mean, it helps the state. But personally, I don't see $140 a barrel of oil again. I just don't see it. But that's just my opinion. I'm hoping the natural gas thing works out ultimately. But it does have some pitfalls. So, any questions? Yes. I'm going to share a story with you. I share this all the time. You'll have to bear with me. It's a story I've heard years ago. I'm going to answer your question, but it goes along with your question. Years ago, there were a bunch of students at a medical college. And the medical college, they do their rounds every day, taking the students around to see the patients. And this one patient suffering from a severe head wound with an infection, the outcome is, not good. Prognosis. Well, the students walk into the room. Professor tells them all of this, about the patient on his deathbed. And he asks, what would you do? Well, one of the students blurts out, I'd amputate his head. Yep, that solved the problem. And that's kind of that's the way I see the borough approaching this whole thing. They're using a huge stick, and they're not thinking about the person out there. We can stop it. We'll stop PM 2.5, the issue that we have. we'll come out with this edict and tell you you can't burn. So while I sit at home and I'm warm, I don't really, that part of it didn't cross their mind. That's the way I see it. Well, I suspect after Tuesday he knows that it's a big issue right now down here, and it is. It's insane. But the big stick approach is not the way to. I think everybody's here is for clean air. I bet I can't find a person here that's not. The deal about burning car tires and all, that looks great. That's what they want to do. Nobody here is burning car tires. It's not. That's an extreme thing that's used to try to sell a point. I don't know. Compassion is not on the list of things that's going on at the borough right now. I heard some testimony at Tuesday night. Some of you may have been there. We all complain. That's just the way it is. But this one young lady got up there, single mom, 2 children, and it was a shame. That struck a chord with me. It just really did. She's struggling to heat the house, did just what the borough asked her to do, come in, fill out the paperwork. Only source of heat she's got is a wood stove. We can't help you out. Your wood stove doesn't qualify. It's EPA approved, but it's not good enough for us. But don't worry, you can fill out this paperwork and we'll give you a stove. So she fills it out, I believe, the way she told us. She filled it out while she was there, handed it to them. They looked at it, said, sorry, we can't help you. Oh, God bless you. And I'm sure I'm not getting this exactly right, but, they tell her they can't help her because her stove that she couldn't use is approved by the EPA, so they can't purchase her another stove. But it's not good enough. So then I believe, and I'm not going to, help me if I'm wrong, we're going to chat afterward. I think she said she huddled around a stove, heater of some type, in the house, gas, electric or either a kerosene heater, for 10 days trying to do the right thing. I would have bought her a stove. That's a shame. What I want to say I can't say here. It's horrible. Yes. Because they have an easement, yeah, I know. And this program is changed. Well, people are leaving already. It's insane. And, I don't know if you attended the meeting Tuesday night, but sadly, to report, the electric rates are going up even more, tremendously more. I know. I agree with you. That purchase then at Healy of that power plant, That's heartburn for me too, but they still haven't produced anything other than heartburn and no power because they had that explosion trying to start it up. They're still working on getting that back online. And, you know, the other thing, and I'll be the first one. This website of mine is left over from last year. I'm a troop supporter, always will be. But the feds are exempt from complying with any of this. So, you know, even though they do a good job on what they do with scrubbers and all, but, you know, their power plants, coal fire, they don't have to meet the regulations that we do. So, what do you... They what? Correct. Yeah, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that, but I'm talking about this current. But this current, I'm talking about the current. I'm talking about this current upgrade that EPA is putting on to the stationary power plants. This is what I've been told. So I hope I'm not giving you wrong information. The scrubber house is all I totally understand. This current push on stationary power plants, which is basically Aurora Power in town, and the Healy University, I don't think is being affected right now by it because it's still not online, but I suspect they will be. I have been told somewhere in the $13 to $40 million range that they'll have to upgrade an additional, technology, I guess you call it. I was told that the federal part of it, the bases would not. I may be wrong. That's what I was told. I don't know. What's really hurting us here is the borough came up with some DC and borough, I guess. The borough always sold this as being local control. If you look at it, the borough doesn't have much input into it. Supposedly, DC, they claim, drives everything. But apparently the borough did put in context to the PM 2.5 or particulate levels of stoves. 4.5, I believe, is the rating for EPA-approved stove. The borough said, that's great, but we want a 2.1 or 2.0, somewhere in that range. So there's a conflict all the time. The feds, they're satisfied with their stove rating at 4.5. The borough is telling us we've got to have it down lower than that. It causes heartburn. Yes? Doesn't work out well, does it?
You look at the VA, you look at healthcare, you look at Amtrak back in the day. Every single government is driven right to the ground.
You're preaching to the choir.
Yep.
I don't understand.
Yeah.
Thank
But
you.
they sold this saying that we needed assistance. A private organization, group, or business would not do it. They're exactly right. They wouldn't.
Sam, I'm
Because it
sorry to
doesn't make
interject,
sense.
but time's up.
Okay.
Next, Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to use the dice up here because I got some paperwork I'm going to be looking at and referring to. I'm going to be approaching this from a real estate broker perspective. When the air quality ordinances first came to the borough, the real estate people, we started going nuts. Absolutely nuts. And what we told the Borough Assembly was, when you use the term illegal in an ordinance and you are licensed, you can lose your license. You can lose your livelihood. And they sort of liked that because they realized that we would be the enforcement arm of this. The real estate community would look at this and say, okay, you have to change this out. You have to change this out. You must do this. Now, this happens to you whenever you lease a property or sell a property. Whenever you give up a part of your rights to another person in the home, it has to be an EPA-compliant heating system, or it's illegal. Now, I'm one of the 7 real estate commissioners in the state of Alaska, and we are charged with protecting public's interest in real estate. And now ponder that. You're a landlord, you're a homeowner, and you're in a spat with your tenant. And he's pissed. And he starts taking a look at this wood stove that might not be EPA compliant. And he turns you in, or he turns in the realtor. And that's what we're looking at now on a statewide level. We're starting to see them. It wasn't anticipated, it wasn't intended, but it's a consequence. Now, in October, there's going to be an election to remove the clean air portion of this. To me, we still have an ordinance making the transfer of real estate with a wood stove that is not compliant illegal. This vote doesn't remove that. It's not a part of it. It's still there. So that's something else you were going to have to look at. Now, I always look at what are solutions. What are solutions to this? And I sit on the city council, and you have a very large attainment area and a smaller non-attainment area. And the city of Fairbanks, it's in the non-attainment area. And for us to be compliant and go into the attainment area, we had to go for 2 straight years without a single day of PM 2.5 particulate over a specific level. And we made it. We did it. I wrote a resolution to have the city of Fairbanks go into the attainment area and have the DEC forward that and be the entity that has the EPA recognize it. Fell on deaf ears. Fell on deaf ears. So I look at what the borough has. The borough has some tools to help, actually. They have the smoke monitors. Now, if I would take a look at it and I'd say, okay, let's use this and recognize the specific areas that are not in attainment. And it's a lot smaller than what is on a map right now. There's 55,000 properties in the Fairbanks North Star Borough, and I'd say maybe 2,000, 5% of the Fairbanks North Star Borough is not attaining it. So we can look at and say to the EPA and the DEC, we have cured a lot of this right now. And if we make our non-attainment area exactly small in what it is, which the borough now has the equipment to do, you look better. Now, there's fines that the Fairbanks North Star Borough can give out when you're discharging wrong. And the first fine that was ever given out was in the city limits of Fairbanks to a person that went through the wood stove exchange program. There's the lady here in the red. She said the human factor. The human factor, they installed it wrong and he operated it wrong. You're always going to have the human factor, no matter what. Be it wet wood, be it installing it wrong. Everything is right. Now, the Fairbanks North Star Borough, Mayor Castle was recently in the newspaper. And I feel sorry for what they said for him. Believe me, I know what the newspaper does, and you'll say for 5 minutes something, and they're going to use something inflammatory. Now, looking at the borough, they've given out only one ticket this year, just one. Yet, the thing we always hear is there's a whole lot of noncompliance going on. But they've only given out one ticket. So what they're trying to do, my opinion is, they're trying to show the issue, trying to work with everyone, and get this better. My fear is the EPA. The EPA, if there's non-compliance, if we don't show how good we're doing, if we don't go down the road and have the non-attainment area smaller, the EPA will force the borough to write the tickets, to enforce this more. And I don't think they want to do it myself. Otherwise, they would have been doing it. So those are the consequences. My thought is be proactive. Have the borough show what the actual non-attainment area is now because they have the equipment to do it. Show how good the Fairbanks North Star Borough has been. Show the progress that we've made. There's 55,000 parcels. Probably only 2,000 of these are incorporated on the issue. So that way the rest of the part would be fine. And you can focus the resources on what needs to be done. And the borough has the wood stove exchange program, things like that. And these are tools in the toolbox to use. When it comes to IGU and Fairbanks Natural Gas, listen to my radio show on Monday. I've got the general manager of IGU on. We're going to talk about the purchase, and we'll answer some questions for you. So anyway, it's my thoughts. Any questions? Yes. Yes. And we have. And we have. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Due to the atmospheric conditions and the ground level and how it, how it's very, very low above seawater right there. In the North Pole area, you're always going to have those spots no matter what you do. You're always going to have some. It's just the nature of the geography of that area. But what you want to do is show how around it, like this is an isolated spot. 98% of the Fairbanks North Star Borough is compliant now. You've shown the progress. You've charted it. We have the tools to do it. That's what you want to do. That way, when the EPA finally looks at everything, you can say the Fairbanks North Star Borough, the city of North Pole, this area, we all went in. We did everything possible. We worked it. We cannot fix this. This is geological, geographical. This will never be compliant and give us the waiver for this one area. Yes. It's only an opinion. It's only my thought. But on down the line, if you look at the nature of the beast, Did you read today's Anchorage Daily News? You're the smartest man in the room. But the Matsu Valley, they're having their air quality. That's next. Juneau is having its air quality. Yeah. I'm not familiar with that. I play in my own sandbox. Yes. Okay. Okay. That's, yeah. Okay. Well, it's, the the overriding factor is EPA and what they can have the federal government do. Transportation funds, school funds, things like that. Yeah. And we're workable, on a local level, we're workable with the assembly and people you vote in. We're not too workable with the EPA per se. You had a question? Over time, the first time, this is their first year out. Over time, they should get better. Over time, they'll get more accurate. And that's what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. Blew up, yep. Yeah, I believe it. Yeah. As I end here, what I did is I believe that giving you as much knowledge as I can, and what I did is I made 20 to 30 copies of the AlaskaFairbanks.com, where you can go and get more information on every program, every regulation, every thought from the DEC, the EPA, everything that's available, all the resources to read and look up. It's back there if you want it. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lance Roberts.
Okay. I'm going to skip around a bit, cover a few points, and I'm going to cover the latest ordinances that are up, talk about what it takes to change the situation. There was one really bad thing said at that meeting this last week. There's a few things, but there was one that I thought was really atrocious, where he said, because the initiatives passed, we had 4 years where the borough couldn't regulate home heating, because we passed citizens' initiatives till the other side was able to rally enough troops to defeat it. That didn't delay anything, because this is ultimately the state's problem. They could have been working at those 4 years and made things happen, and they didn't do their job. Okay, so what the MOU, which was our first mistake, getting this MOU with the state, that just puts us in charge. You can say they sell that by saying local control. So that's fiction, because we have no control, technically. Now, this gentleman's right that the EPA can't make us do anything, and we're doing things, and I will address that in a minute. But really, we're doing things that we think the EPA is telling us to do. But that's not local control. It's not even local implementation, really. Great, I had the word, and I should have wrote it down. It's local, that's it, local capitulation. That's what it is. Instead of saying, hey, when they came in with one monitor that wasn't even certified to be running at that temperature, telling us we had a problem, they should have put in the millions it takes to actually study to find out precisely what the problem is. They didn't. They just said, you have a problem, you fix it. We don't have the money, and they've given us little bits of money over time, but never enough to do the complete study that needs to be done. We've never had this full-bore speciation study that actually determines the contribution of PM 2.5. See, PM 2.5, it's just a stack of things. You've got road dust, you've got forest fires, you've got solid fuel burning, you have oil burning, you've got gas burning. It's the cleanest, but it still puts out some. You've got cars, regular and diesel. You've got all those things that add up, that take you over this acceptable level. And what they're doing is they're having us focus on what they're saying is the largest part of the problem. What it is any individual wood stove, in general, though that's becoming less and less over time as technology changes, will put out more PM 2.5 than an equivalent, well-maintained oil stove. But the mass of people doing wood compared to the mass of people doing oil doesn't make the math work to where wood is the majority. Now, it may be in the North Pole area where you have less industry, less commerce, less traffic, because it's a little more rural. But there's still a lot of contribution from oil. In the 2012-2013 speciation studies, there was one monitor in town that had more diesel than it had wood, and there was one that was within 4%. They haven't done, since then, a big speciation study to really make determinations. The mayor was looking at doing one last year. We gave him a bunch of crap because different people gave him crap for different reasons. I gave him crap because I wanted one that was more robust, that would really do some more profile industrial pollutants coming in. And he decided in the end, even though we actually approved the money, that he wasn't going to do the study. So it didn't get done. So we haven't had a real speciation study in 5 or 6 years. So we don't even know if everything they've done so far has done anything. There's nothing to compare from then to now. So now that we're into this, so one of the problems is that we're only regulating solid fuel. There's nothing being done about other things. If you don't maintain your oil stove, you're putting out a lot more PM 2.5 than a well-maintained oil burner. And not everybody gets theirs cleaned every year as they should and gets that fixed up. So you've got problems there, and of course, automotive problems. And when you think of automotive, remember when we had the emissions program, carbon monoxide, that whole deal we went through for decades. I won't tell you what I did to get through that period of my life legally, because it wasn't. But the point is that they made us go through all that trouble, and in the end, none of that did anything. What did it all, what solved the problem, as pointed out by air pollution control members at some of our meetings, is that it was solved because technology changed. The car manufacturers, and so maybe the regulation the EPA did on the car manufacturers accomplished that issue, but nothing done at the local level solved any problems. It just shifted money around. It cost people money and shifted it to people who did that service. It didn't solve any problems. It just kept us happy with the EPA, who should have realized that it wasn't going to solve the problem, that kind of work doesn't actually do it. But in the end, what's going to solve this problem is technology. Now, gas is one of those technologies that could solve it if they could get cheap enough gas to make it economical enough to use. That's all questionable. I'm not going to get into that issue, but you've got to make that happen. And with our current administration that killed our gas line, I don't have high hopes. But things are happening, so we'll see where that goes. The other tech is one that I brought up this last month, these ESPs, electrostatic precipitators. They're proven technology around the world, been used industrially and commercially. They now have them residentially. They've proved that in Europe. They're trying to bring them here. We brought them in front of the Assembly, and they're so afraid of the EPA doing something. There's a thing called backsliding, where if you make a regulation, so the boroughs made regulations, the EPA took those the State of Alaska DEC took those regulations that we made, the laws we made, they made regulations out of them. They call it backstopping us, so that it's not just us making the rules. Now the state makes the rules. They can write tickets for the same thing. And then they're going to write that into the state implementation plan, the SIP, that gets submitted to the EPA. So they're saying, well, if we don't let people burn, that's going to be backsliding. I just learned from a memo from the attorney today that we actually can't backslide. DEC says we can't backslide because that SIP hasn't been approved by the EPA, therefore we're not in a position to backslide. Now, it would change all the work the state's done and they'll have to change their SIP. But what was pointed out by an air pollution control member is this thing is so clean. It takes out 80, 90%. I mean, it's crazy what this thing does. It's incredible technology, and it's really simple. It just turns on. It's like a 30-watt light bulb worth of power, and it only runs when your stove is running, and it cleans all this particulate out. That technology wouldn't just work during the burn bans. It would work all the time, cleaning air all the time that stove is being used. I was trying to get the ordinance set up so that you could burn in stage 2 if you had one of these, because otherwise there's no economic incentive for you to use one. It's not, there's economic incentive for you to get a clean stove because you save money, because it burns more efficiently, you cut less wood, you buy less wood. There's incentive. Everybody should have a nice stove and the best stove they can and operate it as good as they can because it saves you money. That's the incentive. But with an ESP, cleaning up the pollution, there's no financial incentive unless we gave you ones. So that ordinance I had last month, they pretty much turned it down. It's been postponed till next week. We've now come up with a plan that will be introduced at a meeting this next week where we're going to allow first a small test of 2 people who did bring those in to install. One of them is installed, the other's being installed. And then we're also actually going to do a larger test of up to 50 people. But it looks like we may not get the test we want because the state doesn't want us to go to the point where we're allowing people to burn in stage 2, even though it's technically not backsliding. So that's where the ESP ordinance is that you may have heard about. And it just shows you how they're fighting the only thing that can save it, technology. All these burn bans, the mayor said the only thing that's the consistent thing with every other place the EPA has been burn bans. Well, true, that's the tool they used, but it was still a crappy tool. These places were better. They all had gas, unlike us. They had a lot of, they didn't have the extreme places. They may have had inversions, not like us. They didn't have temperatures like us, right? No, we're pretty unique in that stuff. But we're kind of being forced to use the burn bans. Now, here's how it works. The EPA can't make you do anything. Their stick is, we're going to affect all these other things out there. We're going to affect power plants. Maybe they'll affect road money. They'll threaten you to do things. Will they actually? I don't know. I mean, they'll probably do something to the power plants because they're directly controlling those air permits and they can make changes in those. They're probably not going to be successful holding other money. We just found out Trump tried to stop sanctuary cities from getting money. They just took them to court and got a stop right there. Right? So it isn't that easy for the government to take your money away from you. And they threaten that a lot. They don't actually do it. So that's just a threat, but it was the stick that was used by people to try and get things done when they wanted to advance this agenda starting back in 2008. Back then, we were right then getting rid of the IM program. We could have got rid of the whole air quality department. The mayor at the time didn't want to lose government employees, and he kept them on even though they had nothing to do for a few years. And then for 4 years, we had initiatives where they couldn't regulate wood heat. They still had nothing to do, but they didn't want to lay those people off, and they didn't end up laying any of them off when we got rid of the IM program. So another thing is, working on this some more, the EPA tells us what they want to happen. We're at a thing now called best available control measures where we have to look at, because we're going into serious non-attainment, we have to look at every single control measure used in every single place across the U.S. that's been involved with this. We have to evaluate every single one and see which ones are feasible, economically, whatever. They don't look politically, but they say they look economically. All right? So they're saying if it's feasible, you have to use these things. So the state has been studying those. We still don't have the report. Our air quality department just got a report. We haven't even seen it on the assembly. And I don't know if that's a draft or a final, so I'm not sure where we are in that. But the assembly decided last year these burn bans and a lot of the stuff they did was because they wanted to, in advance, before they had to, meet those measures that they thought might be put in. So there was no pressing need. They didn't have to do it. They chose to do it because they just didn't want to do it then. They wanted to do it before this winter season so people could get their stoves changed out last summer. That was, some of the logic there, but I think they went too far. They took out the temperature exemption. They took out pellet stoves. So most communities are encouraging and incentivizing people to get pellet stoves. Most of the people dealing with this issue, they want you to get pellet stoves because they're so clean burning compared to wood stoves. They're just incredible. There's just a whole level of magnitude difference there. But our borough is disincentivizing pellet stoves by saying you can't get the no ash for them anymore, the no other adequate source of heat where you can burn when the bands are going on. Well, a pellet stove used to qualify you automatically for that. Now it doesn't. So by taking that out, we've just disincentivized the cleanest solid fuel device you could get. They've also done some other things with masonry heaters and all that where it's not so easy. Now, you can get a variance. I put an amendment in so that you could get a variance on this, but it's not that easy. This lady tried to get a variance and found out that it was really hard to do and you couldn't just sign up and get it done. And so right now the Air Pollution Control is talking through the procedures they want to do on a variance and they're setting this all up. But it's not that easy and you still have to convince them that you should be able to get a no other adequate source of heat designation. So it's not a good system. But that's where we are now. So the no ash change is big. Now this gap that was produced where the gap came about because all the money for the wood stove change-out program that we have now, $2 million, came in. Turned out it had a string attached that we didn't even know when we got it. And now we know that we cannot replace a wood stove with a wood stove if the wood stove that we're replacing is EPA certified. But because the borough moved the number down to 2.0, all the people who got them through the wood stove change-out program before and maybe put it on their own to match the spec that was in force now can't get their stove even replaced for the second time in our wood stove change-out program. So this is a gap, and so I'm addressing it. My ordinance, which I think will pass Thursday, is going to address that gap and allow no ashes for EPA-certified stoves that were made after 1998. There's a substitute the mayor's putting in. But anyway, we're going to close that gap, but that's the kind of thing that happens. So the no ash change. So I guess that's most of the details I wanted to cover. I don't have a lot of time here, so I want to first take questions, and then I'll talk about how to change the situation. Sir?
A bunch of years ago, when the Occupy movement came in, they took over a borough park. A lot of people were upset by it, and the borough stepped in, violating regulations, throw the Occupy movement. The borough said that they couldn't do it. They didn't have any enforcement authority. They couldn't send any because they didn't have enforcement. I'm curious how now the borough has come up with enforcement authority when it comes to the citizens of the borough, violating regulations. If they didn't have it before, what changed?
Okay. So what changed was 3-4 years ago, code changed so that all of the things that were offenses became violations. Just like a traffic ticket, so that you can now write a ticket, an administrative ticket for these things. Now, you can still take it to court. The borough doesn't have police powers, but they can write these citations because they're done under this violation section instead of being treated like a crime. So the borough doesn't have to automatically go to court, but though you can still defend yourself through that process. We did that because the borough had silly stuff in their thing where they thought that they could send people to jail if people violated their rules, and I thought that was too extreme. But now what it means is, though, the flip side is it made it easier for them to go out and fine people to death. Okay? And now they haven't done a lot of that, as has been pointed out. I don't know what the mayor pointed out at the meeting, but 2 citations have been issued. One definitely has one he says is being issued. I don't know where in the process that is. They're trying hard not to, probably because politically they know what's going to happen if they start citing a whole bunch of people in their homes in the middle of winter. But that's what they're going to do is they're going to write tickets and they're just going to try to fine you. Now, eventually, what they could do, if they wrote enough of these and you didn't pay them, because obviously it's more economical not to pay the fine and just keep burning, when they're calling you 80 days out of a year for, which right now we're up to like 35 or something. Eventually, they could take you to court and get an order to make you desist or make you replace it. But they'd have to go to court. They don't have police powers. They can't come into your house. You can keep them off your land. They can't go there because they don't have true enforcement powers. We are a second-class borough. They would have to go through the court process to collect on the fine and garnish PFD or wages or whatever. I mean, they'd have to do that. I'm talking about if you don't pay the fines for so long, they could do that, but then eventually they could take you to court to get you to desist. That's why I think a legal defense fund has already been started, because people see that we want to make sure that people are protected. Sir? Well, there probably is. It just takes time, money, and motivation. Well, so what they're supposed to do, they're supposed to investigate. Now, what they're doing now, because they're not citing, is they're just sending out letters so they can do whatever they want in a letter. But they better not be writing any tickets until they've investigated. That's probably one of the reasons, besides the political reason, the mayor and his office calls every single person who gets these letters to talk to them. But they're also needing to do investigation at some point to determine their facts if they're going to pursue this and make a citation. There's something I fought against a lot when they were forming these things, is just the fact that how are you going to know it's a wood stove in there? How do you know that they have one that violates this no ash? How do you know that they're not qualifying here? And of course, over time, they've just added more paperwork to that whole process because of that. But in the end, they shouldn't be doing anything until they have the facts. They've done their investigation, contacted the homeowner, found out what the situation was, and then cited him based on those facts. If they're not citing based on facts, that's probably one of the reasons there aren't as many citations out. It's because it's hard for them to gather those facts, because they have no access to your house and they can't just get entry because we don't have enforcement powers. Sir? Back to the general fund. It just goes into the general fund. Ma'am? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was just thinking how they could have done this and actually made this work without getting the ire of the population against them, or at least lesser, is if they'd have had levels planned ahead of time, probably, right? And gone to this level 1, and people who complied with that and like maybe registered or got a wood stove change out, they kept track of them. And then when they went to level 2, they grandfathered those people in. Then everyone in level 2 would say, I better jump on this before they go another level. And they could have worked that plan. But what they did is they just changed the rules on you. And now where you could burn before, and it's one of the biggest problems here, is they're punishing the people who are trying to do what was right. They went to the wood stove change-out program, or they paid their own money completely, bought the wood stove that met borough standards, and then said that they couldn't use it. It's just not good policy, and something I brought up many times. Well, with as much money as they've spent on all the programs, they could have bought every single person in ESP and eliminated the whole problem. Sir? So there's a lot of mysteries in the origin, and I don't have enough facts to speak to it, but I just have rumors, so I'm not going to talk about all that. There's just rumors about how it came out, but in the end, it came out because the EPA had these regs, and their monitor tripped off, and then they used that to come after us, just like someone was mentioning, David, they were about to do something in Matsu, or maybe that was Sam, about what's going on with Matsu, which they haven't tripped out of compliance yet. They got within one incident. And they're kind of like us, where they have one section that's really bad that's affecting other places. Though our monitor tripped in the city of Fairbanks, which is mostly clean now.
So would they, is this really an issue? We say it's actually, it's not that the borough is saying we're just using their best.
Well, the EPA certainly has rules, and they certainly started all this. Whether or not there was more stuff at the beginning and how that actually came about is questionable. But the EPA definitely has all these rules. They've done them in other communities all over the U.S. We're just a little unique in our position in the world that their rules don't work as good up here that they've tried to force everywhere else. They're just not as workable here. Ma'am? So I don't think the borough is not using any drones. There may be, I heard that maybe somebody at the university who had access to those might be using them to do some testing or whatever. But I heard that rumor too, and it'd be great if someone took a picture of that. But I brought the idea up, and the word is no drones at the moment. Okay. I don't know, but that's scary.
What happens if some citizen is finding aircraft and then taking photos and then here?
Could be. When they opened it up for anonymous complaints, they made it a witch hunt. Sir?
So the borough, go on to this, okay, we can issue citations. They have a plan for when people don't pay these citations, they're just going to fly by the street?
So they're going to send out 2-3 letters, whatever it is, and then the mayor's going to call and try to work with them, and then eventually, if they can't get anywhere and they give up with all that, then they will send a citation. That's the plan. We haven't got past one level of citation yet, so.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. So in their mind, do they have already the stage of, okay, we issue, say me, a actual fine, and I don't pay that fine, what is their plan from that point? Do they have one? Or like I said, they're just going to fly by the seat of their pants?
Well, I think, as memory serves, I think we can give up to 2 citations a year on that. I can't remember precisely because too many ordinances in my head. But there's a limit to what they're going to do as far as citations in a year. And then eventually, when they get tired of citing you, they might decide that you're the person they're going to make an example of. So the first person's probably going to get the privilege of going to court and having them come against him. And that will probably happen at some point if they really want to push enforcement, is they're going to make an example of somebody to try and scare the rest of the population. That's the way government works, is they try to make that happen. So, but I don't know when that'll happen. Sir? So that's... Mm-hmm.
If it goes into a legal situation, the borough has the burden to prove the fact that you were legally.
It,
the fact that they see smoke coming out of a staff, but the sad part of it is the photograph hide them from their program and in fact.
You're right. The burden of proof is going to be on them if they have to go to a court situation. Absolutely. So the advisory vote that was done in those early days, 8-9 years ago, was an advisory vote to allow the borough to sign a memorandum of understanding with the Alaska DEC to do all the work on this, the local work, to do the enforcement, to do the regulations. Okay, so the Borough Assembly approved that MOU, and that was after an advisory vote was taken by the citizens. So this is not the citizens gave them permission to do it, and then the Assembly decided to do it, and they did this MOU, which gave, which, like I say, is not really local control. Sir?
I'm new to all of this, new homeowner around here. What this young lady was saying over here, one main sense that it is an area where there's why is it that sense?
Okay, so after, and this, I can't remember the history, whether this was a borough mistake because they didn't understand the regs at the time, or whether this was done intentionally by the EPA, but once a monitor is in place for 1 year, it becomes a regulatory certified monitor that's certified to be regulatory. Once it's in place for a year, it becomes a regulatory monitor. And so I can't remember if the borough didn't know that and left it in place too long or what. Now we move ours around. We don't let them sit a year because we don't dare want more of those because they just cause more work for us. But that's where it ended up, because I think because the borough was trying to figure out what was going on, they tried it out and they left it too long and didn't realize it'd become regulatory. But I can't be precise on that.
So yeah, I talked to the lady at the DEC and she said the exact same thing. When I talked to the gentleman at the EPA, he said that the monitor at the borough building was triggered this whole thing, right? It registered a certain number that then the EPA says, okay, you have a problem, fix it. If you have it in an industrial area, which is where the borough is, right? Now we need to place a monitor in a residential area. The lady at the beach said the same thing. The monitor was being moved around to try and find different locations that were triggering it. They left the monitor at first in phone, which then made it a permanent fixture.
Okay. So I got to wrap things up here. How are you going to change this? Well, it's pretty tough going down this road to get back. Number one, of course, is that initiative. That takes them back to where they can't do the regulations on those of the borough can't. Now, understand, the state's still in charge. They've implemented all those regulations in their code and they can enforce it. But there's some advantages here. Number one, you're not spending your money. Now, a lot of air quality money we spend is grant money, but there's some that isn't. Plus, just the cost of dealing with this. I mean, that meeting last night, the other night, that cost money. So there's taxpayer money that's going towards this issue that you won't be spending. The state is usually slower about these things, and they have less enforcement personnel realistically, for this area, they're kind of strapped. So there's an advantage to having the state do it. Plus, then we can work on legislators and governor to do something about it. You can vote for assembly candidates that think this is an important issue and realize that people need to burn their home, and we need logical, rational rules out there. And so you can make sure you vote for those assembly candidates in the next election. Remember, we have usually an incredibly low turnout for local elections. Last year was a 20-year high, and it was 30%. So we're dismal. It's not that you have to go out and convince people that the borough's doing a bad thing with this. There's enough people out there that are conservative and want to protect property rights and all that. You just got to get them to vote. So that's the hard deal. Last of all, besides the legislature, which you need to focus on, the governor is in a position because he controls the DEC and the administrative departments. So there's a governor candidate, Mike Dunleavy. When he was in the Senate, which he just got out of so he could run for governor, he lost his seat in the majority caucus because he voted against the budget that stole our PFD. So you know he's willing to stand. He'll tell you about maybe something else he was telling me about where we can resist the federal government and we've seen success. So we need a governor that's going to fight back, not the governor we have now that just rolls over. Okay? And so that's another important thing that comes up in the state election this year that you need to pay attention to. So I want to bring up Senator Mike Dunleavy's candidate for governor.
Can you imagine if you had a governor that used all the resources of the state to work on your behalf against the EPA instead of in compliance with the EPA? In other words, right now, in some respects, you're being ganged up by both your state government and your federal government against the very people that it's supposed to represent and serve. And so what can a governor do? I mean, a governor can lead on this issue. A governor can lead for the purpose of property rights and individual rights by saying to the DEC, we're going to use our resources, our lawyers, our experts, and fight back on what the EPA is saying in terms of the particulate issue, the science behind that, using, in other words, using the might of the state to represent you, not go after you, not using the state as a police state to go and track you down every aspect of your life. Oh, it's working? Oh, I'm doubling up. How about that? So you really do, and I am running for governor, but I'm not using this as a wedge issue. It's something that's always been near and dear to my heart that we came to Alaska, many of us, and we stayed in Alaska because we're free people. We want to be able to determine what's best for us and our households and our family, how best to heat our property, how best to heat our house, how best to live our life. But you do need folks in Juneau and in Washington. I'm not going to say Washington is a lost cause at this point, but it's difficult. But can you imagine if you had a governor who fought on your behalf against Washington and said, no, we're not going to do that. No, we're not going to use our resources to police our own people and track them down, find them, and just make their lives miserable. And we're not going to do that. As Lance said, when I was in the Senate, there were times I bucked the system because it was the right thing to do for my constituents in the Valley. And you're not alone in this issue, right? The Valley has an issue as well. One small area in the area of Butte where there's some still air. But nonetheless, I think you're going to find those folks down there are going to fight like crazy not to, I guess, knuckle under to the EPA and our own DEC. And I'm going to talk just briefly about gas, too. I can see where gas is in my neighborhood. I live up what they call the Little Sioux. I live up above the Little Sioux. And I look over and I see my neighbors that have gas. I will never have gas. Why? Because I live on 40 acres of land, and to get the pipe to my house is anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000 to $1,000 to get the pipe to my house. So we did the math, and I will save a tremendous amount of money by using oil, coal, which I do, and wood for years, 50 years, 60 years. And so the issue with gas, and I don't want to, we all hope we can get a gas line that's going to bring revenue to the state of Alaska. Not a boondoggle, but one that's going to bring revenue to the state of Alaska. But the problem is this. Just because there's a pipeline that goes within 20 miles of your house, that doesn't mean you'll ever see gas. And so you folks are heating your house using the methods that best works for you. And I think that's what your government should understand, is that it really is. We are a country and a state based upon individuals and individual rights. And your right to be able to take care of your own house and your own family in the manner that you see fit, I think is something that the government should protect, not fight against and not work in cahoots with the federal government. So it's important. And I mean, I'll be brief because you guys have been here a long time and I really appreciate this opportunity, but I went to Juneau to represent my constituents, not represent the agencies, not fight with the agencies against my own individuals. And I'm really fortunate because I will go out to my constituent meetings. I'll go to Home Depot. I'll go to a restaurant. And I am very lucky. And I'll have people that will come up to me and say, thank you for fighting on our behalf. Because I don't fight for the bureaucracy, and I don't fight for the system. That system and bureaucracy is supposed to be in place to fight for you, to help you, to serve you. And what happens too often is you get down there as an individual, good people, the bureaucracy in the system somehow changes folks, and they become police officers and policing your life. That's not what we need. And if I am elected with your help, that's not what you're going to get. You're going to get one of the freest states in the country if I'm down there in Juneau. You're going to have the right to live your life the way you want to live your life and the way you want to take care of your family. So I don't want to take too much time. I'll answer questions, but my name is Mike Dunleavy. I did leave the Senate on January 15th so I could dedicate myself to running for governor. Why am I running for governor? I'm not using these issues to become governor. I want to become governor to stop these things from happening. That's why I want to become governor of the state of Alaska. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. Look forward to talking with your folks, but if you don't stand up for your rights, you will lose your rights. But it makes it a heck of a lot easier if you have somebody at the helm that thinks like you and believes in your rights, first of all. And so that's the kind of governor I will be. That's the kind of governor you're going to get when you elect me as your governor. It won't be a change. It won't be a campaign promise now and a change later. It's very important because, like you, I don't like to be told what to do by the government, okay? They're supposed to be there to serve us. So I want to thank you. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So the answer to your question is yes. And yes, I'm here campaigning, and yes, I'm here learning about the issues in Fairbanks and North Pole. I've been in Alaska since 1983, so I've been all over the state. But these issues crop up, and you have to be in contact with the very people that elected you, the very people you're serving. You can't do it by staying in Juneau, and quite honestly, I don't even care if I'm being recorded, but I would love to be out of Juneau as much as possible, okay? And rubbing shoulders with real people, listening to their real concerns, because we get caught up in Juneau in fiscal issues and pipeline issues. And while you guys are battling with whether you can heat your own home in the method that best suits your family. And so the answer is yes. My plan would be to be out of Juneau as much as I possibly can and be here with real people talking about real issues so we can help you. Yes. Right. I agree. I agree with you. Yes. That's a good question. If you can get online, you'll be able to see who took per diem. I have probably the lowest per diem of any legislator there is. When the federal per diem kicked in last year, which allowed the legislators to take $295, we refused to take that. I think per diem is pretty generous, to be perfectly honest with you. And again, get online, you'll see where we rate on that. This will probably light you up, but I don't want to do that. But the Juneau legislators that live in Juneau, they get per diem to live in Juneau. That doesn't make any sense at all. Yes. Yes. All our money. Yeah. 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 We're using your resources to police you. Yes. Thank you. Oh, thank you. That's right. The idea, I think, there was to bring the government, the seat of government, closer to the population and where they can access it. No doubt about it. Some of my constituents had said, please don't do that because then we'll become like Juneau. But there's no reason why there cannot be committee meetings in Anchorage and in Fairbanks. And it's really in the committee meetings where the meat of the discussion takes place. So there's no reason that can't happen. It was voted to move to Willow many years ago. Yeah, the price tag on that today would be billions of dollars, which is somewhat unrealistic, but there's no reason why we cannot bring government closer to you. And as you said, why can't we get out there and meet where the people are? Not be afraid to meet with the people, not be afraid to listen to the people, because you guys are who we're supposed to serve. So I would be encouraging them as governor to meet more often in Fairbanks, in Anchorage, in Mat-Su, even on Kenai if possible. So move the capital. That would be great if we had $4 to $6 billion. Yes. Yeah. Well, I was one of the few that did everything I could to protect that PFD. I actually proposed 2 bills to restore it. I actually left the caucus because it was embedded in the budget, and I could not vote for that budget because the reduction for the PFD was in that budget. I believe it's your money. I believe it's a transfer from the Permanent Fund Corporation to you. It's really not government's money. And so my goal has been and will be to protect that permanent fund even more so and that PFD even more so, because you people know, just like what you're doing with your wood stoves, you know how to heat your house. You know how to best spend your money. I'm afraid if we take that money into government, we will use it for policing you. We will use it for things that make no sense and boondoggles. People know how to spend their money better than government by far. By far. Thank you very much. Again, Mike Dunleavy. You can go to laskinsfordunleavy.com. I'll be up here a lot meeting with your folks. Want to hear what your issues are, your ideas. But look forward to serving you in November of next year. Starting.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much. Before we close, we're going to hear words from Aaron Richards. And also, I wanted to make just a couple of announcements before he begins. Remember, it's vote yes on 2, free to burn clean. Vote yes on 2. And also go give public comment at the regulations.gov/comment on the EPA PM 2.5 SIP, which closes midnight, February 22nd. So please do comment. Anyway, Aaron, thank you.
Yeah. Get it in early. I just want to thank everybody for coming out and allowing us to host the meeting. And I've really been encouraged by just the really involvement. I came from, I was pastoring in a liberal state. I'm not going to say which one, but I got out of it and came up here. And it's amazing how little interest there really is. Everyone can complain, but if you're not willing to vote and get involved, then I'm sorry, you don't have a voice. And so we offered to let you all use our facilities and have this come in. And you know, we've kind of gotten ourselves in trouble as a nation by perpetuating lies over and over again. And one of those lies is that religious people should not be involved in politics. Separation of church and state. Okay, show me that in the Constitution. All right. But you know, historically speaking, churches were the ones that ran the charges. Churches were the ones that got the congregants to go out and fight in the Revolutionary War and so forth. And I think it's very, very important. So Mrs. Robbins asked me if I would just talk a little bit about kind of how to respond. How do you respond when government starts to overreach? How do you respond when these kind of things happen? And I think we're on the right track. We're all passionate. We're all fired up, and we all have something we want to say about this. And I think that's awesome. I think we surprised the borough with how many showed up on Tuesday night. There was no, you couldn't get everybody in there, and so that's awesome. So I just want to kind of just share just a couple of thoughts real quick. I won't keep you long. Just give me a minute. A lot of times we can look to the scriptures and kind of see, okay, how did Jesus respond, or how did the Bible lay it out in some of these principles? And there were times where, for example, Jesus was unlawfully slapped. All right, when he was and he stood up, he's like, when he was in his trial, but then he went all the way and was, the story. He went all the way to the cross and went through that, and endured all that. But what was his purpose? What was his end result? Paul at one point. He let them imprison him. But then other times said, wait a minute, I'm a Roman citizen. All of a sudden, it changed the rules. And they said, I'm sorry, we didn't know you're a Roman citizen. They wanted to let him out of the prison secretly. He said, no, have him come out and say sorry publicly. He was calling them to account. He was making them accountable. And that's kind of what we have going on with us is, where's the accountability and what is going on? And us as citizens, do we just let them walk all over us, or how far? Where do we stand up, and where do we find? Where do we submit, and all this stuff? And there's a verse a lot of people like to bring to light in Romans 13, where it says, "Let every soul, every person, be subject to the higher powers, for there's no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God." And it goes on about submitting to them and not to be afraid of them, because they exercise the sword for your good, and so forth. And so they say, you shouldn't stand up and resist because, they're God's messengers. And that's actually the term that's used. But what that means is this. They are in subjection to God. He's the one, He is the authority. He is the one that established government. And He's the one that put those rules in motion, so to speak. And so here's the problem. We have an authority structure. And when that structure gets out of balance, we have a responsibility to step in and say, wait a minute, things are off balance. If government is in subjection to God's natural law, by the way, this was the concern of our founding fathers, and this was the very concern as they were drafting that Constitution. The Constitution does not give us rights. You understand that? The Constitution recognizes our natural rights endued to us by our Creator, saying all men are created equal. And that there are certain inalienable rights, and these are self-evident rights, by the way. In other words, you don't have to prove it. It's obvious. You have a right to life. You have a right to liberty. You have the right to pursue happiness. These are natural, God-given rights. So what the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, what this was, it was drafted to say, here's where the government stays out. Here's where these different groups stay out and don't touch. And that was the purpose of it. Not to say, here, citizens, is what you do. No, it's to limit them, to keep them out. So whenever there's a concern for liberty, whenever there's a concern for life, whenever there's a concern for these things, we have to start saying, wait a minute, these are our natural rights. It is the most natural thing to want to keep yourself warm in the Arctic. I grew up in California, and we in the mountains in Southern California, and so we used fire. It got cold there, like 25 degrees, and I'm telling my family back home that they're putting a ban on us to burn wood. They're like, what? In Alaska? You see, it's the silliest thing when you mention it to somebody in the rest of America, and so these ordinances. Jesus said this. They came to try to tempt him, and they said. Talking about paying taxes. They said, should we pay taxes? Trying to trip him up because he's talking about heavenly things, right? And he said, whose picture's on those coins? Well, Caesar's. And he said, render to Caesar that which is Caesar and render to God that which is God's. The problem comes in when Caesar tries to be God. And that's what government's trying to do. Let us play God. Let you come run to us when you have needs. Come run to us when you can't pay your bills. Come run to us when you lose your job. And that's when our society starts falling apart, because you look back in the early days of America, before welfare, before they had all these other things, and what would happen? We would take care of ourselves in our communities. We take care of ourselves within the local church or within our neighborhoods and so forth. And government doesn't like that. They want to be in charge, and they want to get bigger and stronger and stuff. So what do? What's our responsibility? And I think we all share, whatever your religious views are, I think we all share in this. Look, I want liberty. I want less government. I want, that's why we're Alaskans. That's why we live here. And, so what are some things that we can do? Our responsibility, by the way, is to watch, our freedoms, our liberties, and decide which battles are worth fighting, which ones are important, which liberties, because let's face it, we can't attack every single one. We have to look at, what is going on. What are the best battles that we can get involved in, most important ones? Some of these issues, these are your basic rights to warm your family. These kind of things. What battles are worth it? If I don't fight this battle, what then will happen next? What ground do they gain? There are some, that's just a dumb thing. I'm going to focus on this battle over here. Does that make sense? And so we have to kind of look at that and get through that. And so a couple of things that we can do. And, some things are mentioned tonight. And by the way, you guys being out, this is a part of it as well. Just being informed and getting involved, letting our voice be heard and all that, those kind of things. But for those who are believers, believe there's a God, pray. Pray. The Bible tells us that the heart of the king is in the hand of God, and he turns it which way he will. And we pray. We can complain, but do we pray? In the New Testament, the Christians were encouraged, pray for those that are in authority. Why? That we may live quiet and peaceable lives. You know what that sounds like? They're out of our hair. We have liberty, right? And what happens when there's government overreach? They're in our business. And we're stressed like we are tonight. We're given our Saturday night so we can try to figure out a fix to this problem. And so we ought to pray. We ought to get involved, stay informed. It's so sad to hear all the complaints and all the heartaches and all these things, and yet look at the percentage that show up to vote. I'm sorry, you don't have a right to complain if you're not going to get involved and let your voice be heard. And that's one of the loudest ways. And get involved with some of these politicians that actually care. I've been real encouraged with what I've heard with some of these people. They say, listen, I got involved because I saw our rights under attack. I didn't get involved to make my wallet fat. You see? And we get involved and we let them know. There was a group that was getting together. So it's actually going across America, but I was getting involved in the one in California, and where a group of Christians were getting together and meeting with the senators and congressmen and the leaders at the state capitol. And I asked the question to one of the secretaries. I said, how many calls does it take for you to forward these messages to your boss? Like on a topic, how many calls? And I was thinking maybe 50, maybe 100. She said like 5. If 5 people call about a topic, they start passing it on. Hey, some people have been calling about this. The problem is we've been silent. And quite frankly, those that are attacking our freedoms are very loud, but they're small. They're small in numbers. They're loud, though. And so you would think it's the majority. It's not the majority, folks. We really are the majority on many of these issues. But we're just quiet. Why? Because we want to live that quiet, peaceable life, so we don't want to get involved. But we need to get involved to maintain that. We got to fight for our future and so forth. Stay informed, stay engaged, get others. I can't tell you how many times I'm just in town or whatever, and what do? We talk about politics. Challenge people. Hey, we're voting. Let's get involved and keep that connection. And lastly, I just want to say again, thanks for coming out and thank you for hosting this. As we're talking about liberty, and I ask the question whenever an issue is raised: is this giving me more liberty, or is this taking away my liberty? That's really what it comes down to. We are incredibly blessed to live in the freest land in the world. And I believe one of the reasons we have been the freest land in the world and for so long is because of God-fearing people that take a stand and fight for what they believe in and are willing to die for what they believe in. And I just want to say this: Jesus, being the supreme ruler of all, submission to Him is really where we find true freedom. And I just wanted to just put that little invitation out there. Listen, if you don't know Christ as your personal Savior, we'd love to help you. I'd love to talk with you. But you talk about liberty, I'll tell you, without God, I would be so panicked right now in this crazy world. And that's where true liberty is found, is in knowing Him. And so I just want to, if you have questions about that, I'd love to help you and answer those questions. Thank you, Mrs. Robbins, for putting this on, and it's been such a joy to be part of it. I look forward to the meetings in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I wanted to remind everyone about the meeting also that the Fairbanks North Star Borough is putting on. Let's see if I can get that date. Okay, February 28th, Wednesday, 6 p.m. at the Noel Wien Library. So thank you very much, and we'll see you then.